So the 4 essential steps to winning in the marketplace, let's look at the most important one, which is getting the right message. Over the last 20 years, 20,000 business-to-business presentations, 600 complex bid processes, and 10,000 people that we've trained, we've learned one thing, and that's people are not very good at figuring out what the message is that you should tell to a prospect to make a prospect become a client. So one of the exercises we run in our training course and our consultancy sessions is and you should do this with your salespeople. I'm going to send an email out today, ask all of your salespeople to respond with what are the 5 reasons why people choose us rather than our competition. And what you'll find is there's very little consistency. You'll get lots of answers and they'll be different from different people as they come from different points of view. That's the first mistake. In the training course, we put that up and then take the name of the company we're working with off and replace it with the name of their biggest competitor and ask if there's any difference and ask if there's any chance that if IBM are pitching against Accenture, Accenture are going to sound any different from IBM when they stand up and say the same things. And the answer is, of course, generally speaking, there's little differentiation here. Everybody can do everything, and so largely, there's no differential. The second thing is that people make 3 classic mistakes when they're putting their value proposition together. The first thing is they don't always sell the right thing. So if we take ease of use, now ease of use sounds like a good value proposition. Now if our system is easier to use than theirs, then clearly that's a reason for choosing us rather than choosing them. However, often in an RFP, the client has come out and said, we're changing the system because ours is difficult to use. We want a system that's easier to use. In which case, ease of use is not a value proposition as such. It is of value to the client. The client has asked for it, but the client has asked for it from all of the competitors. And so you won't differentiate yourself by going out and promised the value that the client has asked for in the RFP. Now, we call this selling the wrong thing. Here, what we're doing is selling the solution when actually we should be selling the supplier. So the first thing you got to ask yourself is, what are you actually selling? Where in the sales cycle are you? What are you actually asking the client to make a decision on? And make sure you're selling the right thing. Maybe these 2 things are separate and it's 2 separate presentations, 2 separate value propositions, but you have to think about them separately. The second thing is sometimes people choose value propositions. Our people is one, or we're trustworthy is another, that whilst they may be of value, they are either difficult to prove or they send the wrong message. Let's take our people. I never allow people to say, choose us because our people are better than our competition. Partly because it's just unbelievable. It's just not realistic to expect one organization to have better people than any other organization. You believe it because you're part of that team and you believe you've got the best people. But if I'm sat on the outside, I'm not necessarily going to believe it. In fact, actually, I've probably got a better view because I've seen your people and I've seen the competition's people, and there's a good chance at some point you've all worked for each other anyway, and so I'm just not going to believe it. But more importantly, what you're saying when you say my organization has better people is you are saying that I work for an organization that only chooses good people and therefore I'm a good person. Like I'm competent and I'm better than my competition because I work for the company that I'm telling you has really good people. And there's no way addressing that up so that it doesn't come across as arrogant. And so we will not allow clients to choose our people as a value proposition because you can't prove it. And even if you can prove it, it's likely to send an unintended message, which is not helpful. Next thing, of course, then, is people make statements that are features and not benefits. I've got a couple of examples. Operational excellence is not a benefit to the client. It is probably a benefit to you. It allows you to operate your business effectively and efficiently and drive more profit for your organization. But if I'm the client, I don't care. I don't mind whether you make 2% or 4%. In fact, I don't really care if you lose money. I just want my cost to be the lowest. So if my cost is the lowest, that's of value to me. Your operational excellence may well not be. And so if you're going to use this, you have to make sure you can articulate how and why that's of value to the client. And when we push, often what we find is the reason it's included in the value proposition statement is because it's important to the client, to our client that's pitching, not important to their client. As another example here, invest in technology. Again, That's really important to you as an organization if you want to maintain your competitive advantage and your competitive edge in the marketplace. But if I'm your client, I don't really care. I care about what you've done, the innovations you've had, but the innovations you're bringing, jam tomorrow, isn't likely to make me buy off you. So make sure that the features you're giving, whilst they might be really important to your organization, probably not that important to the client. Which brings us on to the third mistake people make, and they find multiple ways of saying the same thing. So here we're talking about excellence quality, quality product, quality of its own, quality of the team, better system performance based on quality. These are all from one organization where we ask one question. What we're saying is, in different ways, that we provide a better service and a better quality product. Now, I would question, is that a value? Probably it is. It's certainly consistent with lots of people in this team. And so maybe we're going to go out and try and prove that our system is a higher quality than the competitor's system. And maybe we're going to win on that argument. But we dilute the impact we have if we can't decide on the consistent way of saying this. And quality is a particularly difficult value proposition because unfortunately quality it's also associated with high price. So if I go in and say I have a high quality product, probably the buyer is going to hear this is going to cost a lot of money because that's the way you associate quality with cost. And so it may well be a value proposition, but you need to make sure that it's clear and it's consistent and that it's concise so that people understand what do you actually mean when you say quality, and make sure they understand that that's of value to them and not just going to cost them more money. So what we found over 20 years of doing this is that there aren't that many value propositions. In fact, there's probably 22. You can expand it a little bit, like ROI is probably increasing revenue or increasing profit or decreasing costs. They all sort of mean the same thing, but there are, hundreds of ways of saying we're going to improve the return on this investment you're making with us. And so our consultancy is about helping you figure out which of these fit and where you play these against your competition in front of the client. But there's not that many. We can argue about the linguistics afterwards, but the actual value proposition concepts are finite and probably not that extensive. So within a couple of hours, we can usually have an intelligent debate and get A, a good value proposition, and B, consensus around it. And consensus is probably the most important bit. So we're asking 3 questions when we help you figure out your message. Number 1, what are you selling? Are you selling your product, your service, or are you selling your organization's ability to deliver it? Number 2, say what? What language are you going to use that is clearly a benefit to the client and not benefit to you, that clearly expresses why they would choose you rather than your competition? And then say what language do we use around it to make it memorable? Because having a great value proposition is irrelevant if the client can't articulate it after they've made a decision. So this is really about making it mnemonic so that people recall the reasons for buying off you, because you're not there when they make a decision. And so we have a 3C test. The first one is obviously it has to be compelling. Otherwise, it's not a value proposition. It has to make me want to buy off you rather than your competition. Otherwise, why would I pay any attention to it? Number 2, then, it has to be concise because I have to remember it. When you present it to me, I have to then go and tell my boss this is why we're choosing them. And so it has to be short and sweet. I can remember 2, 3, 4 words. I cannot remember War and Peace. And so I won't articulate it unless you've made it concise for me. And that means it also needs to be consistent because I need to hear it repeated or have read it different times so that I can remember it. So it needs to be consistent across all modalities and all points of communication. It needs to drive the questions you ask. It needs to drive the RFP you submit. It needs to drive the presentation you put in front of the client. You do all of that, you end up with a compelling, consistent, concise value proposition, which ultimately helps you go from winning 1 in 3 to winning 3 out of 4. And why do we care about that? Because at Vincis, we believe winning is everything.